How's it going, Yankee fans? My name is Alex with my co-host here, Ryan Garcia. And today we want to discuss the other player acquired in the Frankie Montas trade between the Yankees. Obviously giving up Ken Waldichuk, Cooper Bowman, and a couple other prospects. And the Yankees got Montas, their number 2 starter behind Garrett Cole. But they also got Lou Trivino, which is a really interesting bullpen arm. Has had a pretty solid career up to this point. He's currently 30 years old, so definitely still has some time left to be a solid player. He's going to be a free agent in 2025, so they have a couple more years of control over him. And I think that there's a couple of tweaks that Matt Blake can make to Trevino to make him a legitimately solid bullpen arm for the Yankees this year. There are a couple of pitches that, are good for him and some of them that are just really bad, but we want to discuss where Matt Blake can specifically make that impact and influence and, the weaknesses that Trevino has, that if he corrects them, he could be a very reliable pitcher for the Yankees the rest of the way here. So, Ryan, before we dive into Trevino, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great. The Yankees have had a really, really, really impressive deadline, all things considered. I mean, you look at where this team stands right now, and especially with Trevino, I think this is the right type of player to go out and take a risk on, go out and kind of have a reclamation project on. I think Efros gave them some room to do so because he's a reliable, already established reliever. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, when Efros gets into the Matt Blake lab, well, Efros is already pretty good. It's more so Lou Trivino when he gets into the Matt Blake lab. What can we see here? And my favorite thing about Trevino is that super sweeper slider, right? Like that pitch gets a ridiculous amount of horizontal run. We've seen this with a lot of relievers in the Yankee bullpen where they have transitioned into getting more of, more of that sweeping action instead of that dropping action on their slider. He gets 16 and a half inches of horizontal movement on that slider. And it's gotten a ridiculous amount of whiffs. His whiff rate is over 50% this season. Batters have struggled against that pitch. In a league now where people are throwing their sliders more than ever, people have thrown fastballs at a less than 50% rate on average across Major League Baseball. It's the first time that's ever happened in Major League Baseball league wide since we started tracking pitch usage. It'd be interesting to see if the Yankees kind of stick away or steer away from his fastballs and try to get him into a primary slider guy, or if they try to figure out that sinker, which, we were talking about before the show. He throws it pretty hard. It gets pretty good movement. According to MLB Pitch Profiler, it has a 109 stuff plus, which means it's 9% better than the average sinker, which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but when you scale it, the way stuff plus is scaled, 9% is a big, big boost above average. So it's an above average sinker in terms of its stuff. It has a steep vertical approach angle. It does not have anything about it that should scream it's a terrible pitch, but it just hasn't got results. I think the problem is the command of the pitch. I think he needs to throw it for strikes a little bit more. I think coming to, again, better defense in New York than in Oakland, a little less of a spacious ballpark. I feel like Oakland, that's that huge ballpark kind of opens up for a lot of extra base hits that won't really come to fruition at Yankee Stadium that could help Trevino a little bit. Yeah, he'll get bit by the home run ball a little bit more here than in Oakland, but he's a ground ball guy. And I imagine the Yankees kind of honing in on that sinker and slider could help him. And it's not like he's got bad tertiary pitches, right? Look at the changeup. It's a really good pitch. It's gotten great results this year. It has a 250 average against and a 36.7% whiff rate. The cutter has been really good, a 267 batting average and 308 slugging with a 25% whiff rate and a 50% put away rate. And it gets a lot of ground balls. He has a lot of really strong pitches. I just wonder what pitch they start to have him make his primary and kind of where do they go from there, because there are a lot of different routes here. If he goes heavy sinker, I really wouldn't be mad at the Yankees for it. It makes sense. If he goes heavy slider, it would also make sense. So it's really just a matter of where they find in his very diverse arsenal, where do they find his best pitches and how do they change that usage?
Yeah, I mean, look, Trevino's an interesting pitcher, like you mentioned, kind of talking about all these specific pitches. But the one thing that I've noticed when I'm looking at his arsenal, looking at the sinker, fastball, where he locates these pitches, the sinker really kind of hovers in the outside of the plate, but at middle heights, perfect barrel height. It is generating a -4 launch angle, so it's you're talking about not many homers. He hasn't given up a homer off it this year. A lot of singles, 19 hits over 43 at bats. He's given up 442. Average against, but a lot of them are going to be ground balls that just got through the gap. It just could be bad defense from Oakland, which, as we know, is a reality for them. Better defense in the infield probably would take some of those away, better positioning. And if you can get those to the Clay Holmes kind of locator where they're dipping from the middle to the lower portion of the zone, to the bottom part of the strike zone, That's where you want to see. Right now, that sinker is hovering in the middle to outside middle. If you can get that to middle to dipping to the bottom left, bottom right corner, depending on if it's a lefty or righty, you can get a lot more ground balls and a lot weaker contact. I think he's just throwing it a little bit too high. His four-seam fastball as well, kind of struggling in that regard. 342 hitters are hitting against it with a 27% whiff rate, which isn't bad. But it's like all of his pitches are almost down the middle or slightly inside against right-handed batters. He's got to get those to tail a little bit inside. His fastball is generating 8.7 inches of horizontal movement. If he could just get that to tail a little bit more to get inside, kind of like that cutter's supposed to do. He's getting a lot more vertical movement on that cutter. But if he can get that four seam just to curve a little, just to tail a little bit more to the inside, I think he'll get a lot more weak contact against it. But that sinker, that's the big one here. His home run ratio is not good. Right now he's giving up a 20.8% home run to fly ball ratio. With a let's see here, 25.5% fly ball rate, which isn't that high, but the ratio of home runs is just tremendous. So he's got to find a way to cut down on those. Most of the home runs he's given up are off his four-seam fastball, which seem to be right down the middle of the plate. So I wonder if Matt Blake, and I'll ask you this, do you think that Matt Blake starts to decrease the usage of his four-seam fastball and increase the usage of his sinker and hopefully just try to tweak the location and spin a little bit of it? Because I think that four-seam fastball, that's where the home runs are coming from. That's where he's given up the most long balls here and the most fly balls. So if he can kind of decrease that, use that slider sinker combo a little bit more and throw in the cutter, because he has had some success with that and the changeup. I wonder if he sees a little bit more success doing that and just instead of continuing to rely on that four seam. What are your thoughts on that?
I 100% agree. His four-seam fastball does not have any characteristics that necessarily suggest that it's a very good pitch. In terms of horizontal movement, 8.7 inches isn't necessarily blowing you away. And then the 14.3 inches of vertical movement, that's below average. He's not getting a lot of ride on that fastball. And we know that fastballs don't actually rise, right? You can't really have a rising fastball. But that rising effect is, it's definitely it's when it doesn't sink as much as it should, or as much as the batter perceives it does. And his fastball sinks the way batters perceive it should. And so it's not hard to imagine why that pitch is giving up an exit velocity over 93 miles an hour. And why that pitch has been, he's getting tattooed, a 684 slugging, 342 average. It's like whenever he throws that pitch, he makes hitters turn into Aaron Judge. So it's just it's not a good pitch. I would love to see the sinker become the primary fastball and remain his primary fastball. Another thing I would love to see here is maybe he just ditches it. I would flat out ditch that four-seam fastball. I think it's really, really bad. If you want to talk about, well, what about lefties? Throw your cutter. Right? Throw your changeup. Your cutter is a good pitch. I like his cutter a lot. It gets a lot of good results. And ultimately, sometimes you just need to go and chase results. And Trevino gets good results in the cutter. He gets horrific results on that four-seam fastball. And I think we can both agree here, pitch selection is just as important as your actual stuff. If you have great stuff, that's the first big step there, but your pitch selections matters. If you're not selecting the right pitches in different counts, you're not going to be able to put away batters efficiently, and you're going to struggle a lot at the major league level. Throwing 95 miles per hour is great, but his fastball doesn't have any other good characteristics other than its velocity. And his velocity isn't, we're at a point in Major League Baseball where velocity isn't enough to beat people. Teams have faced velocity. Teams understand how to beat velocity. And Trevino doesn't have a 100-mile-per-hour fastball. It's 95, 96. That's not anything that's going to, necessarily stun hitters. Go to your sinker. Go chase ground balls. Get whiffs on your slider. If you have a lefty up, go try to chase with the cutter and the changeup. And again, I think Matt Blake's going to help with pitch selection, but that four-seam fastball it cannot be a pitch he uses at all in New York, really. Maybe once or twice every now and then, but no, I do not want to see that pitch used.
Yeah, I agree. I think you kind of take that out, use the sinker, use the cutter, use the changeup, use the slider. They kind of got Efros as a sinker slider thrower as well. Obviously much better and a lot of control over him. But I like the fact that the Yankees did bring in some guys who aren't just rentals. And Benintendi is really the only rental here. You still have a ton of years left for Efros. You have some years for Trevino. You have some years for Montas too, at least next season. So I'm intrigued by Trevino. Excited to see what he can accomplish here. I'd love to hear your perspectives below in the comment section on YouTube. As always, my friends, make sure to like and subscribe. And we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Yankees episode.